First, let's take a backgrounder.
Every landlord and landlady in this environment, they are now homeless.
It is a battle between nature and humanity. But from all indications, nature seems to be having an upper hand. In some cases, experts conclude that nature is reacting violently to man's inhumanity to it.
Building pattern, no drainages, or where they do exist, they are all blocked. Building within the floodplains.
Many riparian states, including Kogi, Adamawa, Niger, and those located at the tributaries of the Atlantic Ocean in the down southern part of Nigeria, are yet to recover from the 2012 flood, before the arrival of another devastating one, with lives and property given in to the devastating hands of flood.
Back now, go borrow this money. Me I take the do farm. Now come me say my farm, I not get farm again.
So far, more than 5 bodies have been recovered.
It is a harrowing moment for many households, and the water level is rising due to the heavy rains, spilling of Kanji, Jeba, and Shiroro dams, as well as floodwaters from neighboring Benin Republic.
100 kilometers downstream, you have Jeba. Jeba also has opened their own. Where is it moving to? It's heading from Lokoja to Anambra. From Anambra, it will get to Delta, then to Bayelsa State.
Labo Dam is not spilling, and they didn't open it. Labo Dam can only full the capacity when it reached 21.6 meters. But as of today, he gave us the focus in Cameroon for Labo Dam is 21.2 meters.
The National Emergency Management Agency is putting in all our energies to meet up the momentary challenges of relief materials, medical treatment, and relocation of victims, which has resulted in the reactivation of disaster response unit of the military and stockpiling of relief materials in NEMA warehouses across the country, valued at 3 billion naira.
A massive stock here and processing activities is going on in flour mills, so we come to inspect it to make sure that things are going properly, are going well.
As NEMA is stockpiling and reactivating, the water level is also rising. This exponential rise in the water level compelled NEMA on Monday, 17th of September 2018, to declare flood in 4 states as a national disaster in a solemn ceremony in the confluence state of Kogi, while 8 other states are under strict observation. It is a consensus among experts that climate change is also contributing its own share to this yearly unwanted guest. They, however, advise states to relocate their victims to higher grounds and educate those reluctant to leave their homes that one has to be alive to claim one's ancestral home.
On May the 11th, 2018, the Nigeria Hydrological Agency released the 2018 flood outlook in 35 states of the country. The outlook projected that Sokoto, Niger, Benue, Anambra, Ogun, Osun, Cross River, and Yobe states would have high risk of river flooding. It also indicated that Lagos, Bayelsa, Rivers, Delta, and Ondo states may experience coastal flooding. The agency attributed this to a likely rise in sea level and tidal surge, which would impact fishing and coastal transportation. The outlook, which is a yearly projection by the agency, further indicated that flash and urban flooding were expected to occur in Port Harcourt, Sokoto, Lagos, Ibadan, Kaduna, Yola, Abuja, Maiduguri, Makurdi, Calabar, Jos, Owerri, Osogbo, and Ilorin. The Minister of Water Resources, Suleiman Adamu, presented the outlook. He explained that going by the 2018 annual flood outlook, water levels on the River Niger and Benue, among other major river systems, would rise and remain high during the rainy season. He raised concern that some dams in the country are getting silted, with the storage capacity reducing. This, he said, would cause a lot of the water to be spilled through the waterways. Also, on July the 15th, the Nigeria Meteorological Agency, NIMET, warned that many parts of the country were likely to experience flooding due to a shift in rainfall pattern caused by climate change. The Director General, NIMET, Professor Sani Mashi, while giving the warning, said that distortions had occurred in the pattern of rainfall, leading to variations in the amount of rain expected in the country. With the advent of the rainy season, these predictions started to come true, and with the peak of the season came attendant flooding. Thousands were affected, homes have been destroyed, communities submerged, and farms washed away.
Back now, go borrow this money. Me, I take the do farm. Now, come me say my farm, I not get farm again.
So far, more than 5 bodies have been recovered.
My farmer working like rice, even yam and cassava. Yes, everything was managed from me.
This is my shop. My shop is inside the water, nothing to eat again. We are hungry, we need help.
And the flood have covered even my house, both my farm, yam, and farm rice.
I don't know how I go do my people. Oh, look, I come help me.
Even I no get something to eat now. Now, so I come stay here to know whether I go get myself in life.
I have already covered many houses and the farms. You know, people are stranded. So we want the government to come and help us.
It's our first main purpose, especially the old women. They cannot go to farm again. Now, in this period now, no fish to eat is a very big problem.
The current flood pattern, experts say, has shown indices of a similar natural disaster of 2012. Concerned about the impact of the floods on Nigerians, the Director General National Emergency Management Agency delegated a team to visit some military formations to inform them that 12 states in the country had been placed on red alert due to rising water level.
The state of preparedness is apt, the facilities are there, and like the AOC has explained, even simulation exercise has taken place.
We organized the simulation exercise, and with that, we are well positioned and ready.
There are functional helicopters that can be used for any operation in disaster management.
At the peak of the floods, the Director General NEMA somewhat relocated to Kogi State, one of the worst hit, where he declared flooding a national disaster in 4 states: Kogi, Niger, Delta, and Anambra. NEMA also placed 8 other states on its watch list. This declaration was made following President Muhammadu Buhari's order to declare the 2018 flood situation a national disaster.
May I further state and announce that the National Emergency Management Center, the situation room, domicile at the NEMA headquarters, and the 5 territorial emergency operations centers have been activated and fully on ground for effective search and rescue operations.
NEMA had also inaugurated 5 emergency operation centers to facilitate prompt search and rescue operations as well as humanitarian support in the 12 states worst affected by flooding. The agency also put in all efforts to meet up with the challenges of relief materials, medical treatment, and relocation of victims, which has resulted to a reactivation of the disaster response unit of the military and stockpiling of relief materials in NEMA warehouses across the country, valued at 3 billion naira, as directed by President Muhammadu Buhari. Barely 24 hours later, NEMA distributed water purification machines to the 4 states adversely affected by flooding. This was to curb the outbreak of epidemics as a result of contaminated water.
So right now, with the flood incidents around the country, it's highly possible that all the water sources that people used to drink have been contaminated. And we don't want a situation where there will be an outbreak of cholera in the camps. So what we do is we deploy these machines. That's why they are for emergencies. They get there, they start operation in 1 hour. You can have 1,000 liters of clean drinking water for people to drink.
The synergy between NEMA and the Nigerian Armed Forces yielded positive results, with medical outreaches carried out by the Air Force in Niger State, one of the states worst hit by this year's flood.
We are here with our team and the team from Medical Center, Nigerian Air Force Base, Mina. The events are taking place simultaneously.
Observers describe NEMA's approach in tackling the flood situation as proactive and a radical departure from the previous norms that placed so much emphasis on reactionary activities. NEMA attributes its proactive stance to support from the current political leadership in Nigeria, which has enabled a giant stride towards ensuring appropriate actions on reducing risks, disaster preparedness, mitigation, and recovery.
The President has actually ordered the declaration of a national disaster in 4 of the states, including Delta State, to explain, and this I think underscores the enormity of the disaster here and what needs to be done. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, not just by way of providing temporary relief and succor, which is being done in the IDP camps. And we've also asked that the National Emergency Management Authority move quickly to supply additional relief materials for all of the IDPs. I expect that by the end of today or tomorrow, we should have an additional relief materials, water, food relief, and beddings and all of that, whatever is required, not necessarily in this camp, but in all of the camps, all of the IDP camps or holding camps as they are now called, all across the state. Now the more difficult part, and that's the part of it that we need to discuss fully with the state government, is how to ensure that when the water recedes, when the flooding subsides, how we're able to resettle people and and be able to bring them back or put them back in a state where they'll be able to continue their lives normally.
Nigeria's vice president visited some of the flood-ravaged states where he commended the synergy between the states and the federal government. This, he says, has contributed tremendously to mitigating the outcome of the flood disaster.
I think we have a very good response here, and I'm extremely proud of the work that the state government officials, federal government officials have done. But it's only the beginning. I'm here, as you know, to take a look at what to do in terms of a medium-term solution.
Experts say the timely response of the National Emergency Management Agency has helped in no small measure to mitigate the impact of the flood. This, they say, demonstrates the sincerity of purpose of the Buhari administration.
On behalf of the President, President Muhammad Buhari, we commiserate with all of those who have lost their livelihoods, who have lost property, farmlands in particular. But we're also here to assess the damage and see what can be done to help those of you who have lost assets, people who have lost farmlands and all of that.
By conducting on-the-spot assessment of the impacts of the flood, NEMA provided relief materials, rescued people trapped in many communities, defined areas of intervention, and immediately commenced action.
More are still coming. Just like NEMA has approved relief items for the state, both food and non-food, and they have started by bringing in non-food items.
We should continue advocating and asking people to move, to evacuate to higher grounds provided by the state government with facilities. We are here to look at those facilities. Where there are gaps, federal government will collaborate with the state.
Environmental experts say the torrential rain experienced this year is as a result of global warming and the effect of climate change. They are also of the opinion that the enormous level of destruction is linked to rapid urbanization as well as poorly and defectively designed drainage systems that cannot effectively convey surface runoff generated.
Systems like the amount of rainfall that might fall this year or next year by the Meteorological Service does not stop the flood from occurring. If there are no proper drainage provisions, no early warning system will prevent the flood from taking place. If you look at cities like London and so, they are just the same thing as we have here. But then you find that water courses are given their course. Embankments are provided. And use of the land takes consideration for the possible levels of water through lifelong statistics. There are places that flood once in 100 years, once in 10 years. This is the use of knowledge, statistics, if you like, in occupying the land. And if you don't take consideration of that, you just say this is a plot of land and you build on it, build whatever facility you want, cover up the front yard with paving stones and things like that, flood must come.
Environmental experts advocate the application of structural and non-structural measures in the management of flood. Non-structural measures include raising public awareness through enlightenment campaigns and capacity building.
To also look at different ways of how we can go and start educating people, creating awareness, but building how they can, training them on how they'll be able to cope when such situations arises. But it's better to move them away from such areas than leaving them to be there, because the casualty is going to be much.
In places where they don't have land to relocate these people, like places like Bayelsa State, down in the Delta, swampy areas, we could try to harness the water, redirect the flood, build dikes. Energy can be generated from water. You know, bayous can be built where this water can be harvested and used for irrigation and farming purposes.
What we call disaster management cycle. Pre-disaster, during disaster, or post-disaster. You don't need to wait for disaster to occur, thereby you look for an aid from NEMA. We need to do something. Pre-disasters are measures being taken by communities that are vulnerable to environmental disasters. Therefore, if you have a kind of disaster that occurred frequently in your own community, please involve stakeholders, the community. Please, what can we do? You have graduates, you have educationalists, you have people that are conversant or they have knowledge of environmental issues in your community. Call them, discuss what are the measures. If you start something, government can come to your own rescue. But if you always wait for government, that's the major problem we're having in this country.
Every state, not only those, in very flood-prone areas, every state must get involved in education and awareness of the populace on the environment. There is need for education, there is need for sensitization, there is need for awareness. And for those who are living prone to flood areas, the state governments will have to put in place programs that will relocate these people because they are danger. Some of them do not understand the danger at which they have exposed themselves. So they must be educated to realize the danger that they are, they face, and then they should be relocated. And that it means that the government will have to provide alternative houses for them. Maybe alternative economic livelihood, because many of them are there because of economic factors. And so there's need for education, there's need for relocation, and then of course there's need for monitoring. Like we are doing from national level, the state too must get involved in monitoring. Because when you monitor, you'll be able to know exactly what is happening. And then of course, the state government must also, please, when they receive our alerts, they must quickly, take precautionary measures, preemptive measures, and ensure that we don't lose lives, and ensure that there's minimal loss of even property. Because if the state government, local government, and communities are aware of what to do, and they are encouraged and they are helped to do what they ought to do, will minimize loss of life and loss of property.
Experts say how well we fare in the next flood will depend a lot on how we prepare for it now. They also say this is a wake-up call to take climate action.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored, and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. fake news. Don't create it. Don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
Disaster occurs on frequent basis. Some we hear of, others we do not. Terrorism, flood, fire, earthquake, car or plane crashes, building collapse, and even armed robbery, each bringing assets and revenue loss, human mortality, and in 90% of survivors, great loss of hope. Flooding is the most common of all environment hazards, and it regularly claims over 20,000 lives per year and adversely affects about 75 million people worldwide. Nigeria has had its fair share.
Who can say where the road goes, where the day flows? Only time. And who can say if your love grows as your heart shows? Only time.
Emergencies, as the name implies, are not set out to happen, but they can be planned or budgeted for. Disaster management may not avert emergency threats, but it will decrease the impact of disaster where well handled. It then brings to the fore the key phases to management of disaster: mitigation, response, recovery, preparedness, and prevention. Every citizen must be well acquainted with all of them. Wishing disaster away does not avert it. Rather, as put in the local parlance, a man of valor is only identified at a time of emergency. Let us always be prepared.
As the saying goes, one man's waste is another man's wealth. Today on the program, we're going to be tackling all things recycling. So if you have just a vague idea about recycling or you don't know anything about recycling, this is the program for you. This is Window on Abuja, and I am Maimuna Ummi Ibrahim. You're welcome back, and this is still Window on Abuja. To start you off, we have a feature on recycling.
It is estimated that 79% of the plastic waste created is still in the environment. When we throw food away, it does not harmlessly break down. It rots and releases methane, which is harmful to the environment. According to Recycle Now, if all the households in the UK recycled one toothpaste box, it will save enough energy to run a fridge in over 2,000 homes for a year. With a population of 180 million people in Nigeria, additional thousands of fridges can be powered if we did the same. So what is recycling? Recycling simply means using things that have already been used. It is the third of the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and recycle. Experts advise to recycle when you cannot reduce your waste or give out unwanted items to be reused. Recycling is important because it helps the environment, and in so doing, helps humans and animals alike. It is also important to recycle because waste has a huge negative impact as harmful chemicals and greenhouse gases are released from rubbish. Recycling will save our habitat because it reduces the need for raw materials, so our forests and natural deposits can be preserved. This will also save on the energy that is used to convert raw materials to products. Recycling also means less need for landfills. The land used for this purpose can be used to create additional living spaces and green areas. Recycling is increasingly becoming a multi-billion-dollar industry. So why not reduce, reuse, and recycle to make our environment a place we can all enjoy?
Well, I hope you learned one or two things about recycling. I'm sure you learned that plastic bottles are not the only thing we can recycle. Food is something we can recycle because there are millions out there who are hungry every day. Now on to the next thing we have for you. We spoke to the HOD Solid Waste Management and Sanitation about waste being recycled.
The waste management cycle, we say that there's no waste, but what is regarded as waste is a resource in the wrong place. And that's to give us an idea that we can reuse our waste to produce, or either to produce some new products, or we reuse the waste for some other services. So, and the idea is also to generate wealth from the waste. This is very important even from that point of view that it can be a veritable source of income or revenue both to individuals, companies, and even the government.
With the global rise of green consciousness, we wanted to know if it will save our environment by recycling used products, as the growing population of the country means more waste.
For sure. For instance, we have, especially in this age, where we have use of many synthetic materials like plastics, rubbers, nylon, in many of the things that we do now. These are non-biodegradable materials. If they enter into the soil, for instance, it takes a lot of long years, even 100 years before these materials will decay, and we know what the implication can be for our agricultural society. On our agriculture generally. So it will affect the fertility of the soil, and of course, it's a danger to the food security as we have it now. But where these materials that are non-biodegradable, they can be taken out of the waste stream, and they are used for some other purposes, which there are so many things that it can be used for. It will save our environment. And only biodegradable materials that will go into the environment, even the biodegradable materials, we can make use of them for some other things. We can generate energy from these biodegradable materials. And their proper management also will save the environment. We are talking about global warming now and any other stuff that is caused by the emission of some greenhouse gases, which some of them comes from biodegradable waste.
With recycling becoming a growing, thriving sector worldwide, it is believed that government participation in Abuja and Nigerians generally would greatly benefit by participating actively in the business of waste to wealth.
The pilot program on waste recycling that we have now in Abuja, we target a Blue Bean program. And the simple idea about it is that is to ensure that wastes are segregated from the point of generation. We are talking about waste recycling to have a good quality waste to be used for some other purposes, we have to take care of it right from the cradle. And this idea, this has to do with the idea of using multiple bins to segregate the waste. For instance, for the pilot program that we are having in Abuja here, because as at now, in Abuja, waste recycling is in the informal sector. The government has not gone into it as the kind of business operation.
We went out with a team of the recycling collectors to see how it's done and gauge the response from the residents of the FCT.
Yes, the response is very, very good. As you can see, that's why we are collecting the waste every Wednesday of the week. The people are complying to us. We also sensitize them by giving them flyers and free dustbins. That is the blue bin, so that they can put their waste inside. They're sorting out it here. They didn't mix it with the other trash. They separate it separately.
So after the waste is collected, what do they do with the waste?
A recycling center. When we collect these recyclables, we take them to the recycling center for further sort them into their various categories. And from there, we send them to interested companies and other people that they can use that in the factory to manufacture whatever they want to manufacture.
Creativity is something that God has blessed each and every one of us with. I'm sure you will agree with me. But there are some people who are just more creative than others. I mean, don't tell anyone, but truly I can't draw a straight line. But the architects out there, I'm sure they will ace that. Well, here is a report for you from Habiba Oladipo on a house that was built out of plastic bottles. Yes, I said plastic bottles.
Paipe community is no different from other communities that surrounds it. Its houses are constructed with traditional and modern materials. However, Paipe has one building that stands out. It is the bottle house. The bottle house is built with over 10,000 plastic bottles that would have otherwise ended up in a landfill, adding to the environmental degradation the world is trying to stem. Emmanuel Awonto Asugu is part of the engineering team that constructed the house. He says recycling PET bottles is part of global efforts to reduce plastic in the waste stream, especially the approximately 8 million metric tons of waste plastic that enters the Earth's ocean every year.
The lifespan of PET bottles is as long as 300 to 500 years. What it means is it doesn't biodegrade. It doesn't get ruptured or spoiled until you physically, destroy it. So with that longevity, with that toughness, and we came up with this concept.
The research group for the bottle house comprised of staff and students.
And found an abundance of PET bottles. So started looking into it and ran a number of tests on these bottles, and we found that they are very tough once you sand fill it and cork it.
Another unique feature of the bottle house is the cooling system.
For this middle wall, we have it filled with water. And the water is never going to diminish by evaporating. Why? Because we have corked it. So all of that property inside that PET bottles remains the way it is until somebody brings a knife or something to physically destroy it. This is the way it's going to be.
So you don't need a fan or AC here?
Oh yeah, you can see this. When we were outside, it was a bit scorching, but in here it's quite calm and cool.
Situated on a parcel of land donated by the community specifically for the project, the bottle house, which consists of 2 bedrooms, a kitchen and a toilet, costs 1.5 million naira to build. It is fitted with solar panels for electricity and overhead tank for water supply.
The idea was to give it back to the community so they can use it, and then we can come back and study how the building is being functional, to make the building self-sufficient. So we have water and you have electricity. Water, we had water harvesting plan where when it rains, all the droplets are channeled through the gutters of the roof to a tank you'll find at the back. So from that tank, it is now piped into the kitchen and to the toilet. So that's how we harvest the water. Yeah, and then the idea for electricity was solar. So while in this house, your basic amenities, your water, your electricity is provided.
Upon completion, the house was handed over to the community, which the village head of Paipe, Yonana Danladi, is glad to receive.
We are surprised by the innovation of seeing a house built of water bottles and plastics right in our community for the first time. We will use it as a community clinic.
For the research team who worked on the bottle house, they intend to build more houses using recycled plastic bottles, thereby keeping the environment healthy.
God bless the hands that built that house out of plastic bottles. And all I can say is kudos to all the creatives out there. Well, we've learned a little more about recycling, and I know that you've learned the difference now between recycling and upcycling. So even if you're having a conversation about recycling, you can add your ideas too. Well, here is